No virtuosity, the struggle is real. Heart conditioned to hate, man, they struggle to feel. Streets of crimson tide, cause they coming with steel. Cops popping 2 guns with tasks to do. American gangsters attacking you. See the news every day, it's deja vu. Cry freedom for the days, cause the blacks are blue. Man, what's a Whitlock Matt to do? Take flight overnight, the pass a few. Pray for the fallen like the pastors do. Fight to equalize or retract your crew. Claim the basis is...
My name is Sarah, and I am the co-host and producer of Bon Park Podcast. It's a living oral history of the Waterloo region, and it's incredibly community-based. It's something I co-created with my friend Marshall Ward. Together, we interviewed over 300 people, and we dreamed up 4 films. One of those films is Hip Hop Hope. In the winter of 2022, Marshall and I had been hearing about the creation of a music festival celebrating Mel Brown and Black music in Waterloo region. And this was a very Bon Park happening. We met with Dr. Lee Willingham and Carlos Morgan and some others at Wilfrid Laurier University and inserted ourselves into the conversation. We pitched that we create a complex 3-part series all about the festival. The participants, artists, volunteers, venues, creators, all of the voices, and create a snapshot of this inaugural festival and symposium. We talked to every artist, including Havaya Mighty, who was fresh off of her Juno win for Best Rap EP of the Year. First time that award had gone to a woman. And we were incredibly moved by the work of educator John Corbin with his workshop for hip-hop writing and production with Black youth. And also the Emergent Black Music Showcase curated by local treasure Sam Nabby. That series has gone on to live a life of its own in transcripts, helping to secure funding for future years of the festival. It's now become the Grand River Black Music Festival. Relationships were made through these conversations. Marshall and I were moved by the words of these creators and artists and musicians, and a theme that kept reoccurring was, this festival is great, but what's next? Where is the space for our music? Where is the space for the everyday work that we do? John Corbin and Marshall Ward had many lengthy phone conversations about what might come next, and out of that was born the idea for Hip Hop Hope. With the support of the Kitchener Public Library, Wilfrid Laurier University, Waterloo Region Community Foundation, and the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, I've been filming for Hip Hop Hope since December of 2022. This was the next movie Marshall and I were going to make. The creation and the spark behind this film were what brought me to Wilfrid Laurier University in the postgraduate program for community music. I'm in university because of Marshall Ward and because of Hip Hop Hope. And then we lost Marshall.
It is my pleasure now to introduce Sarah Geidlinger. She, her is a filmmaker, podcaster, and digital media creator in Waterloo, Ontario. She is currently pursuing a master's degree in community music at Wilfrid Laurier University, for which she is creating the documentary Hip Hop Hope. She is the producer and co-host of Waterloo Region's Bon Park Podcast, a winner of the Waterloo Region Arts Award. She is also a joyful member of KW Glee's Adult Pop Therapy Group. Big round of applause for Sarah.
I didn't trip coming out, so I'm winning so far. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight. This is the first time I've ever plugged in this guitar, so they had to tell me how when I got here. I just want to say thanks to Roshan and Pat the dog and the registry for having us and for dedicating this evening to our Marshall. I wore my Marshall shirt for us. Yeah, and thanks for joining us, especially my daughter Summer, who has to come out and see all the weird things that Mom does all the time.
Okay, so I know this is difficult, so again, I'm remind you can stop it at any time. But I just want to start out with hearing how you first met Marshall, starting with Sarah.
I think I met Marshall second, actually. Marshall and I met at a little park in Waterloo, Ontario called Bon Park. We were work-at-home, stay-at-home parents, losing our minds, and we met at the playground with our kids. Well, they would be swinging on the swings and sliding down the slides, and we were always so excited to see each other because we were the two people who wouldn't talk about what it's like to raise kids. We talk about art and culture and like, when's the last time you did something fun?
So you knew almost right away that this
Yeah.
was somebody who would be in your life.
Yeah.
What was it about him that made you feel that way?
What is it about Marshall that makes you feel that way? So Marshall and I spoke on the 30th of November, 23. I had sent him a long email that was just like an update on my life. Marshall had been the driving force Marshall had been the driving force pushing me into going back to school and trying new things and dropping old things that weren't serving me. And I just sent him a long email that was an update on how everything was going and asking him about his kids and his life and what's new and what he's been watching lately and how his deep dive into America's Greatest Archive known as Seinfeld was going. And we had a good talk about that. And that later that night around, I don't know, maybe between 9:30 and 10:30, we were just texting back and forth. And Marshall wasn't a big texter. He had just gotten his first cell phone like a year ago. And we were texting pretty good back and forth. And the last text I have from Marshall Ward just says, I'm going to bed. It seems like you've already drifted off. And that was the last text I have from him on November 30th. On December 7th, I got a call from Marshall's wife, Sylvia. And Marshall's wife, Sylvia, and I are friendly, but we don't talk or call each other. It's not the kind of friendship that we have. Me and Marshall were buds, and I would see Sylvia out on the sidewalk or in the neighborhood. And immediately I was concerned, like, why in the world is Sylvia Ward's name showing up on my phone? I was kind of shocked and nervous. And I just picked up the phone and said, what's wrong? Are you okay? Are the kids okay? Is Marshall okay? And her answer to each question was no. So I just took a deep breath and listened, and she had told me that Marshall had passed away. I'm editing. Just gonna go to, she had told me that Marshall had passed away, and I asked her what I could do, what they needed. They're only a few streets over. And she just asked me to call Angela, who is another partner that Marshall and I work with, and to call Colin. And I just made those phone calls and sunk into a pile of darkness. I don't know how else to say it. This is so goofy. We probably can't even use this. This is my Marshall Ward t-shirt right here. I called Angela, I called Colin, I told them what happened, and I sunk for days. And actually, Colin and I both threw ourselves into helping the family with whatever they needed to move forward with plans. And I'm not really one to sit around and do nothing, so helping the Ward family was the only option to move forward for me.
We put on what I would say is a pretty great visitation.
I call it a funeral. It was a funeral.
We put the fun in funeral.
We did.
And at Marshall's visitation, there was stations sort of set up to the different aspects of his life, because he was a writer, and so there was thousands of his columns that he's written for the newspaper, and he was an artist, so there's his artwork, and he was a huge wrestling fan, so it was my job, I volunteered for it, to set up the LJN rubber wrestling action figures in the ring with Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth. And I'm not a particularly spiritual, religious person, but I knew that if Marshall was watching, he'd be highly critical if the scenario in the ring
If I had set it up,
wasn't plausible.
not knowing.
Yeah.
Miss Elizabeth doesn't go with the other thing.
Yeah.
I don't even know the names of the wrestlers.
You know, he really was, he was so passionate. He loved the things he loved so much that it rubbed off on other people. And
Amplify.